Hey everybody, I'm here with Justin Coetsee. He's a local entrepreneur and he's a mentor and advisor to numerous tech entrepreneurs and tech companies and involved with a lot of meetups in the tech space. Today we're interviewing him in his capacity as one of the founding members of TechInBraam. How's it, Justin?
Hey, Tyler.
Cool, man, I'm good, thanks. So if you could just give us a quick introduction into what TechInBraam is.
Yeah, cool. So TechInBraam is, in a nutshell, an attempt to get a technology cluster going in Johannesburg. Right? So the easiest way to explain it to most people is to say, think Silicon Valley, Silicon Cape, iHub, those kinds of things. Even though we kind of hate the correlation with Silicon Valley, and everyone says, Silicon Valley was a once-off thing, you can't really replicate it. We're trying to follow kind of the cluster theory, and so we think that we can certainly put together a technology cluster. If you look at the banking sector, if you look at the insurance sector, mining sector, they've all formed clusters in town, right? And I mean, we all know, as much as we think our banks are retarded with some of the services they offer, I think that's just because we're spoiled, right? If you go into other parts of the world, first world countries in Europe and the US, you'll realize just how advanced our banks are in a lot of aspects. And I believe a lot of that was because they just naturally formed their clusters, right? And the clusters really drive competition, the competition drives the innovation, and so the skills in that space grow. And if you talk to someone who's been in the banking space for 20 years, chances are they've often worked at more than one, often more than two of the different banks, right? And so that knowledge gets transferred between all of the guys. And so that's what we're trying to do with TechInBraam, is get a cluster going in Braamfontein, obviously. And the idea is to try and drive the innovation, drive the skills. We all complain that there aren't enough skills, and the depth of skills are lacking in South Africa. And so the idea is, by driving that competition, obviously the innovation comes, and the innovation drives that depth and breadth of skills.
Cool. So how did the idea of TechInBraam itself come about? Tell us about that process and then what actually happened.
Yeah, I think it's been a long time coming. I think it's something that's evolved over a couple of years, certainly for the sort of founding members. I think a lot of people have tried similar activities in Johannesburg. But really, I'd say the vision has come down to Professor Barry Dewalski of the JCSE. He's been very animated and very passionate about the software development community, largely in Johannesburg, but in the country as a whole. He gets involved in activities across the country, and so he's always been on a drive to kind of create a technology community, certainly in the Gauteng region. And so I started getting involved with Professor Barry probably 2007, somewhere around there, my career at IBM. And I also started to gain this passion for, hey, we need more software developers, we need better skilled software developers. We don't have enough of the really good guys, and when you find those good guys, every company holds onto them, and so they get paid really well. And over time, starting to work with entrepreneurs, I started to realize there's almost a kind of a natural synergy between technology skills and technology entrepreneurs. And a lot of startups today, even though they might not be technology focused, leverage technology a lot more than traditionally. And so my personal passion around software development kind of grew into the entrepreneur space. And so when Prof. Barry and myself started chatting, the idea was to then, a cluster sort of kind of evolved naturally out of that. The other founding members are ThoughtWorks, very, very dynamic company from the US, who, the charismatic leader is a bit of a philanthropist. I often say he created the ThoughtWorks company to kind of sponsor his philanthropic ways. And so he's created this company that are very keen to get involved in communities and disrupt things a bit and kind of push the envelope. And so they were very keen also to get involved in creating a technology cluster here in South Africa as a whole. They looked around Cape Town and decided they felt there was more opportunity in Joburg, and so they started their offices in Braamfontein. And again, they met with Prof, they started chatting, I was starting to chat to them. we eventually realized the three of us were chatting to each other, and we came together, and TechInBraam was born from there.
Oh, that sounds awesome. So, Braamfontein, can you tell me why this area, why Braamfontein specifically?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, so we have some debates with folks around, you know, is Braamfontein the right area or not? And I think it comes down to the vision, right? This isn't a 5-year play. This is a 20+ year play. And so when you start looking at cluster theory and you look at the various building blocks of a successful cluster, we couldn't find another space in Joburg that meets, ticks all the right boxes. Braamfontein, from a location point of view, is brilliant as far as transportation infrastructure is concerned. Gautrain, Metro Rail all land there at a park station. You've got 4 exits from the highway coming into or around Braamfontein. You've got a massive taxi rank just across the Nelson Mandela Bridge. You've got metro bus services. You've got the city bus service. The name's eluded me for the moment, but you've got all the transportation infrastructure there, right? Building infrastructure. There's now a lot of communications infrastructure. So Neotel, the city. So you've got all the infrastructure. Then you've got 2 universities right on the doorstep. So you've got all the talent coming in there. There's a bunch of schools. There's a bunch of tertiary education companies around there. Wits University is still in the top 1% in certain research fields, right? So you've really got some top talent right there. There's a lot of culture happening in Braamfontein. So the city themselves have been driving this rejuvenation of Braamfontein. And so there's a lot of culture. There's nightclubs, there's great restaurants, there's some nice clothing stores, great coffee shops. And so with the young talent that's walking around there, there's this vibey culture that's taking place there. As I mentioned before, within 2 kilometers of Braamfontein, you've got the banking cluster, you've got a mining cluster, you've got the insurance cluster, there's a media cluster around the corner. You've got the government, both national government, local government, and provincial government are all have various head offices in the city, which are again within the 2 kilometers of Braamfontein. So when you add all of those things up, show me another spot that has all of those things, right? So Braamfontein just made great sense for us. And again, if you take that long-term view and you look at the rejuvenation that's already happening in Braamfontein, I see it being a really fantastic space in 10 or 15 years' time. Cool.
So, I mean, you were talking about clusters. For those that aren't familiar, or even those that are, could you run through what you mean by this cluster theory?
Yeah, so I mean, cluster theory, as I've spoken a bit about, there's obviously the technical aspects, which talent, access to talent, infrastructure, all of those things come into play. But what's really key about a cluster is the sort of geographical location, right? The co-location of companies that are in a similar industry. So if you look at somewhere like Switzerland and watchmaking, right? Why did the Swiss become really that good at watchmaking? Well, you had a bunch of these guys that were pushing the envelope around making, producing watches. And so as each one, had a breakthrough, that would push the next guy to make the next breakthrough. And so, the great quality around Swiss watches grew from there. Silicon Valley, in our space, right? Exactly that. You have these tech companies that keep pushing each other because one comes up with the next best innovation, and so the next one and the next one, and they keep pushing each other. So you have this kind of competitive environment that drives the competition and drives the innovation. And what's really cool is then once you start getting a community, because you're all kind of co-located, it's very easy to get a community going, right? And once you have that community, people are sharing ideas. Guys are moving from one company to another and taking some of that knowledge with them. When one company has a breakthrough, they share that knowledge with the next, so the guys kind of leapfrog into the next innovation. So having it co-located in a geographical space is very important to have that competition that drives the innovation, that drives the skills. And again, we chose Braamfontein because besides trying to get IT companies together there, it ticks all the right boxes in terms of the infrastructure, the access to talent, the culture, even living space. I mean, there's all sorts of sports facilities in and around Braamfontein. There's fantastic living space. The guys that play Braamfontein have, you know, taken that kind of New York apartment idea, concept, and started to create some really nice living space in Braamfontein as well. So yeah, I mean, I think that's in essence what a cluster is about. It's really about driving competition, it's about driving a certain industry. And if you look, certainly in South Africa, the IT industry, I think, is one of the few areas where we really can grow. You know, if you just look economically at the country, the banking sector, the mining sector, insurance, none of those guys have a 15% growth prospect, right? They're all going to continue to grow at a relatively steady rate, but none of them have a pocket that they can suddenly tap into that's going to give them a rapid 15% kind of growth.
Yeah.
Whereas IT we do, because again, a lot of those industries, maybe not so much banking and insurance, but certainly mining, retail, even media, there's a lot of opportunity to further leverage technology, or to even start leveraging technology a lot better. So I think there's huge growth for that. And that by itself means more IT companies, more entrepreneurs, right? Because again, those industries aren't in themselves going to grow by 10 or 15%. And that's why we kind of have this flat GDP growth for the country, whereas IT can probably grow at somewhere between 8 or 12%, depending which analyst report you believe in. But you know, you have that growth opportunity, and so you know, tech entrepreneurship in Braamfontein just makes perfect sense.
Cool. So yeah, just on Braamfontein itself, I've seen a lot of buildings being sort of redone inside and turned into some great looking places.
Funky, colourful,
yeah,
vibey.
It's definitely a little bit hipster.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a hipster element, but hey, techies, you know, we like a bit of that hipster stuff.
We love culture.
Yeah.
So let's quickly talk about how TechInBraam sort of differs from something like Silicon Cape, and how you see TechInBraam and Silicon Cape working together, and then something like Josie Hub itself. If you could just give a little bit of insight there.
So I think TechInBraam is more like a brand, like an initiative, right? Where the idea is, you know, in Joburg we're very good at doing stuff. We're not very good at talking about stuff. So there's a lot of stuff happening all over Johannesburg, but you literally got to go and, you know, lift every rock to find the stuff that's happening, right? So we're really not as good as the guys down in the Cape are at kind of self-promotion and kind of identifying our heroes that we can kind of put up there as role models for people to try and follow, right? So we have a bunch of stuff happening in Joburg, but we're not getting the benefits of a network effect, right? So it's all sort of 1 plus 1 plus 1, and we're still ending up with 3. We're not kind of getting the sum of the parts are greater than the whole, right? By having a community set up going. And so that's really what TechInBraam is about. It's not really a money-making thing. It's a brand to try and bring the tech community in Joburg and Gauteng together. So even though we're looking at, you know, this geographical co-location, certainly that's for certain initiatives, but that doesn't mean we're going to exclude anything else that's happening in Joburg or Gauteng. And in fact, we almost want to see ourselves becoming almost like a community of communities. So supporting some of the stuff that's already happening, some of the smaller communities that are already up and running. And so I suppose that's very similar in spirit to what Silicon Cape's doing. I think our hesitance to, you know, go out and shout to the whole world and market ourselves really aggressively is more a case of we wanting to grow kind of organically. We don't want to make all sorts of media promises and create a lot of PR and hype, and then a whole bunch of people show up and suddenly there's not much happening, right? We kind of want the community to drive this, and so because we've got this 20-year play in mind, rather let it grow organically and let it grow as people say, hey, why aren't we doing this? Cool, let's do it. Or even better, why don't you do it and we'll support you, right? So I think that's more of what it's about. It's not just about entrepreneurs, and it's not just about tech startups. We still want to tap into those existing companies that are there and encourage them to be a part of this. We want to tap into those other clusters that I mentioned and say, hey, support the tech industry in South Africa, right? A lot of South African companies today do things in-house, and you know, there's good reasons for it. But I think if they come to the party supporting us, we can certainly grow our tech industry. I mean, if you look at the South African tech industry, it's, as an economy, it's the 20th largest tech economy in the world, right? If you look at our economy as a country, we're somewhere around 25 or 28, depending on whether you look at the World Bank or some other ratings, but we're in the top 30 in terms of world economies. Yet, if you look at our ICT exports, it's like 0.02% of the worldwide ICT exports. So we're like nowhere on the map as far as creating products and exporting those products are concerned. And yet we've got them. If you take the restaurant industry in South Africa, right, the 3 biggest point-of-sale systems are all homegrown systems. It's not international companies that are coming here. But most of the other industries, we tend to use international companies. We take an IBM product or a Microsoft or an Oracle and we build a solution on top of it. So we're really good configurators and integrators. We haven't exploited building stuff. Right? And so that's kind of what we want to encourage, is bring these other clusters together, bring existing IT companies together and foster kind of innovation across those sectors, push the local entrepreneurs in the tech space to build innovative products and grow their businesses. So I think it's similar to what Silicon Cape's doing. I think maybe we're not going to go out and market ourselves as aggressively in the beginning and kind of let the momentum build itself to begin with. And we see Josie Hub as being part of that, right? I think Josie Hub is a fantastic initiative to get a co-located working space going, to push tech entrepreneurs, and I think we've got very similar objectives in mind, and we've started talking to the guys at Josie Hub to actually start working together and seeing how we can use TechInBraam as a brand and use Josie Hub as a venue, as a physical place, right? They're literally around the corner from Braamfontein. As TechInBraam, we also, Wits University is one of our big endorsers, big supporters. We're very lucky. They've leased sort of 5 buildings to us. They're probably, more accurately, they've leased into the Joburg Centre for Software Engineering to kind of run and manage. And they're setting up this precinct called Chimologong precinct, which stands for Place of New Beginnings. Right? And the idea there is it's the university also saying, hey, we see the future in this sort of thing and we're willing to get involved. And so that Chimologong precinct in Josie Hub will be very similar in terms of physical places where people can come, work, build their businesses. And we need more. 2 is not enough for Joburg, right? 2 is not enough for the IT industry. We need lots of those. So I suppose we're very similar to Silicon Cape and to Josie Hub, except that I think we're wanting to push ourselves more as just a brand that drives the local community and brings that community together and creates platforms for people, right? Platforms for our heroes. So Joburg, again, like I said, we're not very good at identifying our heroes. One thing Silicon Cape are really good at is celebrating those heroes, or the Cape as a whole are very good at, right? So you hear about the successes down there, you don't hear about some of the successes here, we forget that guys like Bill Fenter and Ronnie Uptecker and Jeremy Ord, they all started those businesses from scratch. They were all entrepreneurs, and instead today we see them as these big businessmen because their businesses have grown so big, and we haven't celebrated them as entrepreneurial heroes. And so create a platform where guys can almost connect with these heroes and see them as a role model, so that they can start to aspire to become the next sort of Ronnie Uptecker, or even a guy like Elon Musk who came from Pretoria, right? We don't celebrate those guys.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think, partly we see those guys as corporates because they create these big entities versus startup guys. And little do most entrepreneurs know that these guys are actually prepared to get involved in some cases and even invest or mentor and advise. It's just we're not connecting those dots.
I'll give you an amazing example. I met a guy from a company yesterday called Striata. Just over 100 people big, so it's a sizable company, based here in Johannesburg, but they have offices now in sort of the UK, in the US, Hong Kong, all over the place, right? And they've built a product. It's not just a services company, they've actually built a emailing and messaging product, and as well as a marketing tool. And they sell these all over the US and the UK, and in fact, since having gone international, they've really grown a lot faster than just they've saturated the local market. We don't know about these companies. We don't hear about them. They're multi-million rand companies that were self-funded, you know, as bootstrapped, running successfully, 100+ people working there. We've got tons of those all over Joburg, and we just haven't got the platform to expose those companies and have the local guys see, hey, but I can do this, right? So
I think you make a valid point there in the sense that one of my big things has always been that the reason Cape Town works versus Josie, and this will play to your cluster theory around Braam, is that within Cape Town everything is sort of 15 minutes away from each other, you know, so it's very easy to connect. Whereas in Joburg, I mean, we split between North Rand, the South, East, and West.
We're all over, I mean, especially IT. So that's why I keep mentioning banking and insurance and those guys, because they naturally grew inside the Joburg CBD, right? And IT wasn't really big back then. And once the sort of IT industry started to take off, people were moving out of the CBD. And so the result was IT companies have grown up all over Joburg, right? You can't think of a single spot in Johannesburg or Gauteng where you have upwards of 10 companies, IT companies, in the same area, right? Here and there you find spots where there's 5 or 7 or 8 of them. How much they're collaborating or competing, you don't know. You know, there isn't this coffee shop where the guys happen to go sit and next thing there's some serendipitous kind of connection because they happen to overhear a conversation from each other. And that stuff doesn't happen here, especially in the IT space. Whereas, you know, in the banking industry, there's 3 or 4 examples of where the industry came together to solve a problem. You know, BankServe as an example.
Sure.
You know, there was a South African banking initiative. You know, prepaid cell phone. You know, there was a telco initiative in South Africa. And we don't have too many of those in the IT space. So, and we believe part of it is because the IT industry is so dispersed across Johannesburg. There's no sort of cluster of IT companies.
Sure. No, I fully agree. So, is there sort of anything happening at the moment, or anything you want to talk about, and how can people connect with you guys and get in touch?
Sure. So the TechInBraam website, we just launched it last week. So it's TechInBraam, TechInBraam.co.za. Keep an eye on the site. It's going to keep evolving as we grow, as we get feedback from the community about the types of things they want there. Right now, there's a very simple listing of events. We're going to make that a little bit more interactive coming soon. So through the website, you'll be able to see what events are happening, not just in Braamfontein. You know, probably we'll soon have a calendar that shows events across Johannesburg. And that's anything from stuff that happens on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. As TechInBraam, we're also putting together what we believe is the first Agile conference in South Africa, Agile Africa. I don't know if we've officially registered the name, but that's the idea anyway, is it will be an Agile conference. I think 12th or 13th of August is the date that we've targeted for the conference this year. Quite exciting. We've got Martin Fowler coming out here, who's one of the sort of thought leaders around Agile development in the world. We're looking at potentially a startup. It might be specifically a lean startup conference in about March next year. That at this stage is kind of, we're more in conceptual discussion than sort of something official. And the name slips my mind right now, but the university is also doing a conference coming up shortly to do something to do with media and digital arts and that sort of stuff. But the event will be listed on the website shortly, so you can go to techinbraam.co.za and find out all about it. So yeah, we're going to be promoting more and more events through TechInBraam, as either TechInBraam events or just IT events taking place around Johannesburg, so people become more aware of them.
Cool. Well, for me it's a very exciting initiative. I really hope it works. I think it should. I mean, I don't see any reason why it shouldn't, and I really believe there's a lot of value in, first of all, the events, because they're going to connect a lot of like-minded people, but just the slow clustering of building a great tech community where people can, people just know they can go there and find other tech people or anyone involved in that sort of space. Maybe not just tech, but other entrepreneurs. So we can have these kind of coffee shops where we can just meet up randomly and have these serendipitous moments. But Justin, thank you very much for your time, and all the best with TechInBraam and everything else.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And yeah, if I can encourage people to go to the site, there's an email address. You know, let us know about events. Let us know if you're keen to get involved and help. Obviously, this is for the community, so any ideas, anything you want to see happening, let us know. Or if you just want to have your name down on our newsletter that's going to start going out pretty soon, making people aware of stuff, drop us a mail.
Cool, perfect. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, keep up. Ciao.